So, kia ora koutou, ko Victoria McLennan, toka wingua, but please call me Vic. For anyone who doesn't know me, welcome to this Fireside Chat. I'm really excited about running this series. I'm going to do them across this winter because they're a good thing to do when you're staying at home and the weather's yuck like it is outside today. Really feel for everyone in Auckland for all the flooding that you've had. And today I'm joined by a very good friend of mine, JD Trask, and we're going to talk about skills and talent in the workforce and the future of work, cliche as that may sound, and what the impacts of AI might be. So I think it's going to be a pretty interesting discussion. So kia ora and welcome, JD.
Thank you so much for having me on, Vic. It is great to talk with a good friend. I think it's going to help make sure that this flows really naturally for everybody listening, and we hopefully all have a lot of fun. So thanks again for having me on today.
Thanks. Now, for everyone who's listening, I am on my own. I have no helpers today. So please ask your questions in the Q&A. I may or may not answer them in the typing, but JD and I will try and get to them by reading them, and we'll answer your questions as we go. So let's kick into it. The first thing I thought we'd get started with is you can tell us a bit about Raygun and your role as CEO and founder, and a little bit about your backstory. It'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Yep, I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Raygun. We build software that helps our customers, who are other software teams, report on software faults and the performance that their customers experience so that they can try and remove said faults and improve performance. We are about 1,600 organizations around the world today use Raygun, from tiny startups to massive organizations. Our software does scale regardless of the size of the organization, but we ourselves are a relatively small business, about 35, 40 people, based here in Wellington. Pre-COVID, we're a little bit more international. We kind of pulled in a wee bit through that time, but we now have, we're back in the United States on the East Coast. We're mostly in Wellington. We have a person in Australia, another one in Taiwan. So my background a little bit, so I feel like I've always been a nerd. I love computers, and apologies to anybody who's heard the story that's already on here, but we got a family computer when I was about 8 years old, and it was a 486 SX25 with 8 megs of RAM and a 213 megabyte hard drive, and we had Windows 3.11 and DOS, and I was kind of going through all the commands in DOS, and I just happened to get to QBasic. And after I kind of realized that it wasn't just a normal text editor, but a coding environment, I was really enamored. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever encountered. Like, I can build whatever I want. And the analogy I've always used was like finding an infinite box of Lego pieces. You can actually see a little bit of Lego in my background there. I'm rediscovering it with my son these days, which is cool. But that was the moment where I kind of felt I liked building stuff. And in that sort of virtual realm of inside the computer, I could kind of do whatever I wanted. I kind of find it interesting to think a little bit about the modern day metaverse, and it's like we kind of already have it if you live in the digital space, So I fell in love with that. I started selling commercial software at high school, made a little bit of money from that. I knew that I wanted to run a software company. I always say I inserted my Encarta 94 CD-ROM and I typed in software because we didn't have the internet then, and I found that there was this guy, Bill Gates, and I was like, oh, okay, so like you can economically do okay, and you can have fun writing code. Like that seems like a pretty cool path. So I liked that idea, and I just focused on that like a laser the whole way through high school. A friend of mine said to me a few years after we'd left high school, I was like, what were each other like? And he said, you're a supportive and good friend, but he said it was really clear you had what you wanted to do, and as long as no one kind of got in the way of that, you were a good friend. So I was like, great, that's fairly true. So I've always been pretty laser focused on stuff. I have a very obsessive personality too. So once I get into something, I really like to get into it. And so at a fundamental level, I love software and technology, but I also love business. I really like business. And I've described it as both of them are mechanisms by which to achieve more. So software, to use the analogies, like, you put on the Iron Man suit in effect, and you can, be 10x more productive by having the computer do some work. And then there's scaling with people, bring together a group of people on a shared mission and you can get more done. So combining those two interests since I was a kid. I spent 3 years working. I got a Bachelor of Information Science at Massey University in Palmerston North because I thought I needed a degree. And then I joined a company called Intergen here in Wellington, which was really awesome. They still had the 3 founders in the business. It was about 35 people when I joined in 2004, and it exploded to about 160 people, I think, by the time I left 3 years later. And even through that time, I think the only reason they employed me was because they were the founders. And I told them in the first interview, they're like, "What do you want to do?" I'm like, "Leave and start a software company. That's the goal," And I think because they were like, "Yeah, it sounds like us. That's why we're running a software company." So that was good. They were understanding and engaging, and I learned a lot about that. I was fairly fearless in asking about the business when I was there. How are we actually operating? And I learned a lot about openness and transparency from the management there. Tony was an accountant or auditor by background, and so he was very laser focused on the numbers. And so we would talk about some of those numbers every Friday at Intergen. And I took that into our business, and I found it really powerful for ensuring that people are quite understanding of why certain decisions are made. Because when you try to hide some of that, people will make meaning, and it's often wrong. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. I still love to code. I still love building businesses. I describe it as, the grass is always greener. When I'm sitting there doing the business strategy stuff, like, I could just write some code. It'd be so good. And then when I'm writing code, I'm sitting there going, I am but one man. What am I doing? I have all these people at work to write code, so goes both ways. So I don't code. Oh, you go. Yep.
I just want to ask you a little bit more about that, because the standard kind of cookie cutter software as a service model is that the technical person is the founder, they grow the business to a certain size, then they step aside into a CTO or chief product kind of a role and bring someone who knows how to grow and scale a business and to run the business. That's the cookie cutter model. And you're the exception to that. And you and I have talked about this a lot, that you still remain quite technical, you're still quite hands-on tools, but you're also one of the sharpest business people I probably know as well. So you bridge that really nicely. What led to you deciding not to follow the standard kind of model and still having your feet in both camps?
That's a good question, because it's certainly not what people expect folks to do. You're bang on with that. I joke that my title is CEO. It's the Chief Engineering Officer, but the way I think about business and I think about software is actually they're very, very similar. Systems level thinking, and you can sort of look at a business and identify like, hey, that particular function is slowing down the rate of flow over there by this much, so you go and work on that. So I quite often bring that same lens over to looking at the business. I also find as a general observation, being able to bring 2 domains of information or more together is like a superpower. We talk a lot about specialization as you scale and grow and really focusing in. And we all know that, in New Zealand, we don't have so many specialized roles, but it's very common overseas in those larger organizations. So given that we sell to a technical audience, I feel it's really important that I actually understand and can fully empathize or sympathize with people that are suffering from, the problems that we help solve. It also helps me accelerate the understanding of around things like product delivery. Now, what that means is, I don't have to go and ask to figure out how long something will necessarily take. Now, to be very clear, I'm not so precise on that, that that I don't sometimes break the classic CEO fault of like, surely that's just going to take a week. And it's like, no, it's not. So I will definitely listen to folks on that. But if you use like the t-shirt sizing methodology, I'm pretty good at kind of going, well, this is probably going to take a month. That's going to take 6 months. Here's the way we should put these together and bring them together. It does come back, though, a little bit to prioritization as well. So, at the risk of being slightly controversial, and I want this to be, open and honest, and we talk this way, but I struggle a bit sometimes with this around the conversations with privilege. And the reason I struggle a bit with that is because I think it's the wrong P word. I think that the right P word is priorities. And, there's certainly people in situations where they have to prioritize certain things. That means that they can't prioritize other things. I make a pretty deliberate effort to prioritize the business, the tech, and the family side of things. And that has meant that I'm quite aggressive at cutting out things in my calendar and time to make that available. So that's because I want to be conscious of the priorities that I'm putting in place. So I don't make coding at work a priority number one, for example. Mm-hmm. At work, the CEO hat is firmly on. I trust the people in the team. I love learning from them. But at home, like here, I run a 32-core Threadripper with, a 3090 and a 7900 XT. I've got 128 gigs of RAM, rated NVMe disks. I'm running AI models. This is what I do at home on the weekend for fun. I like to go deep there. So that's it. It's at home, I do the tech stuff. At work, I do the business stuff, but because they overlap in there. If you ask me to come and play on your cricket team, I won't be able to catch a ball. If you ask me for almost anything that's not business or engineering, I'm probably terrible at it. So that's how I kind of balance that mix. They're just deep, deep passions of mine.
Right. Well, we're here to talk about skills and talent. We've got a good background on you. Conscious we've spent quite a lot of time on that. I probably asked you too many questions. So let's talk a little bit about skills and talent. So really briefly, the last 3 years have been really tough for businesses, and everyone's been crying out for skills and talent leading up to now. And I guess my first question is, that been your observation for the last 3 years as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The battle for finding talent was extraordinary and almost only topped by the whiplash of how suddenly that changed.
And then I guess that's the next question. What are you seeing today? Because it has changed, hasn't it? It's changed quite quickly this year.
Yeah, my observation has been we're getting a lot more applicants. Again, slightly controversial sort of point of view. There's a lot of people that, believe in a forever remote work lifestyle. And based on what I'm seeing coming through, I think that pool might be getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so there's a lot of people looking for purely remote jobs at the moment. Right. And so that seems to be maybe 80% of what I'm seeing on the purely inbound side. What is fortunate, I think, so far, but I don't think this will hold forever, is it does appear a lot of the people that maybe are finding themselves on the job market are finding roles relatively quickly still. We're not seeing that top line unemployment rate kind of going bananas. We're still seeing a little bit of salary increases going on, and I think that we would see salaries dropping if the wait times on finding roles was getting longer, because the power imbalance would have gone the other way, or supply demand realistically. So we are seeing that. So, in my mind, I would be, if you were thinking about going for another job, I'd probably want to do it post haste, because I'm not sure that market's going to look the same in sort of 6 to 12 months, sadly, Yeah.
Yeah. And so the signs seem to be that we've got a recession kind of hanging over our heads. We're seeing the big tech firms globally laying people off. We've seen a couple of New Zealand-grown software as a service companies laying people off. Do you think that we're going to see more of that then in 6 to 12 months' time?
I think we'll see an increase of it down here. I mean, there's a website, layoffs.fyi, that tries to chronicle most of the major layoffs that occur. It's a global site, but it requires people to put them in there. like a lot of things, we often see them happen, say, in America first before they finally sort of, the wave makes it over here. So I think it's been a lot more punishing in the US than it has been here. The other thing that I think is worth acknowledging too is that there's two, the reason for this, call it a problem arising, is twofold. There's the VC sort of class of startup, and then there's the megatechs. And if you look at the megatechs, what do they sell? Well, to be honest, at the C level, what they're selling is stock. They're not selling their products. Now, and if you permit me 2 minutes here on this one, but what a lot of folks don't seem to appreciate is that shifting interest rates is like changing the laws of physics, like discovering the speed of light change. Like, it actually underpins far, far more than people potentially fully appreciate. You can think of the interest rate as being like, what is the risk-free price of money? So if I was to go and get $1 million and it was 1% versus 5%, that's the cost of that capital. When you start investing in businesses in the market, like a Microsoft stock or a Google stock, there's more inherent risk there. And so if I can now get 8%, let's say, relatively risk-free, Microsoft has to produce, a 12% or 15% rate of return to compete with cheap money. And so people are really confused when they see hyper-profitable companies laying people off because they don't have to. And it's like, well, technically, no, they don't have to, but their shareholders want to see that go up. And the best way to
return on investment, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to increase your margins. And the best way to, the biggest cost is often salaried staff. And so they're trimming that to compete with that interest rate to make the stock stay attractive. The second thing that's happening is we have a lot of venture capital in tech, in those earlier stage companies. And I don't know that a lot of sort of engineering group of people and all of that fully appreciate the complexities of capital raises in those businesses. So, for example, if you see a company and they announce a massive capital raise, we've raised $200 million, and you think, gosh, that's a lot of money, but they don't seem that big. Like, they must be killing it, right? And it's like, often the answer is no, they're not. They're losing money hand over fist. But why they got that amount of money is what was the terms in the agreement to get the cash. And it might be that, let's say they raised $100 million. They'll be saying, okay, well, I want a liquidation preference on that of even, let's say, 1 times. And what that means is if I put in $100 million and the company sells, I'm guaranteed back a minimum of $100 million. All well and good. Until the valuation of these companies crumples. So I've raised $100 million. The market now says the multiples are all down here. An investor's only going to invest money valuing the whole company at $100 million. At that point, we're wiped out. None of the equity holders par that last investor is going to own anything. And so you've got these companies in the earlier stages that are kind of going, we both need to raise, but if we raise, we're going to lose our ownership of the company. Or we've got to let people go to try and drag out, hoping that multiples come up and we find a growth mode in here. And so that's really hard at the moment. There's a lot of, startup executives that are stressing pretty hard about some of these things with their ownership models. They are having to let people go because money is expensive. It's hard to come by. Both those things I don't think are going to necessarily change a whole lot in the next few years. Because the interest rates, they're going to stay high. They're going to keep going higher. But that's kind of how it works. It's nothing to do with the capability of the individual or the goodness of the idea behind the business. It's everything to do with the financial situation that underpins everything.
That's great. Thank you for explaining that. And now if we do get time before the end, let's talk about share options as part of an employee package, but only if we get time.
Yep.
So getting back to talking about skills and talent, something we've discussed quite a few times is the ability and challenges of growing our own talent here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I know that you're one of the employers who develops staff from entry level versus always looking for perfectly formed seniors all the time, which some other employers do. So can you just give us a bit of an idea as an employer, what you're looking for when you hire?
Yeah, sure. I look for folks that are self-motivated. I want to see a high level of passion, a very high level of passion for the general area that they're working in. So, for example, when I say that with Raygun, if I was hiring a software engineer, I'm not saying they should be passionate about error correction, but they should really love code. Best described as they think about this stuff even when they're not doing work. They're that interested in it. And to be honest, I've noticed in recent years, and partly because of how much people are paid and the demand we have and all of that, is that's not as common as it actually used to be. And it might sound super weird, but the number of times now where I'll interview a software engineer and just ask the question, so tell me about your computer at home. And a lot of the time now I don't own a computer. And I'm like,
right.
Really? Okay. So how into computing can you really be? So that's a bit of a challenge. So look for the passion, look for the self-motivation. I tend to look past overly optimistic kind of career ladder climbing understanding in young people. So I have a friend, we'll call him Sam because his name is Sam. And he's now a principal engineer in a company, which is great. And I still remember him as a graduate and him coming to me, and I'd like to say I kind of mentored him a bit, but we were just mates really. And he was like, I've joined this company and I've been here for like 6 months. And he's like, I think I should be running the engineering team. Like, what are you talking about, Sam? And then, now he's a principal engineer, and his constant answer to everything, I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't know if I'm ready for this, And so that's one thing. When somebody is a little bit kind of overly optimistic about their career path, I try to sort of suggest that that's not really how that works, but not hold it against them, because some of that just comes with the experience of understanding maybe like why the engineering manager doesn't just run at everything, on the way.
And not dampen their excitement about it, I guess, is the other tension, isn't it? That I remember hiring a graduate business analyst once and asked him, the cliche question of where do you see yourself in 5 years? And he said, CIO, and this was CIO of an organization that employed 1,000 people. And I was kind of like, I don't want to dampen your enthusiasm. And I did hire him, but he wasn't going to realistically be the CIO in 5 years in the world that we're in. So it's quite a tension, eh?
Yeah, it is. And you don't want to, like you say, you don't want to destroy any enthusiasm, although the enthusiasm shouldn't be 100% derived from titles and salary. It is an exciting space. I like to say to our team, we are the builders. We're the people expected to invent the future. We should engage in that boldly and be excited about it. It's one of the reasons I love business, is partly like, there are laws, but like do whatever you want, basically, figure it out. I love that freedom to invent that's in there. And that's part of the curiosity and the passion, is that they will wander and invent if they are like that. The other thing we've certainly found is kind of to the diversity point, is that works remarkably well in engineering. So we've found that the best way to do that has been by bringing through graduates. Like a lot of people, or a lot of organizations, our engineering team is still lopsided, but every other team at Raygun is more women than men, including the leadership team. We work on it, but we're not kind of into quotas and things like that. We just try to create an environment that is going to work for everybody. And that's worked pretty well.
So I guess that leads to my next question, which is something you and I also discuss often, is our education system producing the graduates that we as a workforce really need right now?
Short answer, no. I don't think so. I kind of want to. This is going to be bad because I know one of your questions that's coming up. So if you don't mind me bringing it in,
go for it.
You put to me the question about Massey University, banning ChatGPT, and what do I think about that? And
it's your former university, and I'm fascinated by that decision that they've made.
Yeah, it puts me in an awkward spot because it was my former university, and I was actually their junior alumni of the year, which was nice. And so I don't want to say necessarily anything too bad, but
there are posters of JD on the wall at Massey. If anyone ever goes there, you will see his smiling face.
I'm sure folks will flock there now. No, but I mean, it seems like a pretty silly thing to me. I was chatting to our VP of engineering, who's also a Massey alum, and we were saying, it's interesting because under the same logic, like we used to go into exams and you would write the code or pseudocode, if you will, in pencil on a piece of paper. And so I'm looking at this with ChatGPT and I'm like, yeah, you could use that outside of an exam, but like, what's the problem? Because you'd still need an exam, right? Now, so unless the university really doesn't want to do exams, they're basically saying don't use the tools, which, you could have used the same logic to ban computers, because they have information in them and you might learn something. And, going to be make a bit of a pointed comment here, but I was really disappointed when they got to the point of banning, I think it was Don Brash speaking, in a place of learning that is afraid of new information, historically not a great place to go and learn things. So I'm not a fan of some of that. I think they should be embracing this technology. It's foolish to cut short. And I know they've spent an absolute pile of money on tooling to try and detect people using this. Like, man, it's just wrong thing. It's just not smart. And I was reading some reviews the other day of some early tools that were trying to analyze and detect AI generated content, and particularly with LLMs, right? Because there's much more than just an autocomplete, but they're trained on data. And I remember this person pointing out that I think the United States Constitution comes up as being 98% likely to have been written by an AI, and you're like, cool. This, like, talk about wasting time. This is, I don't know. It just seems silly. So a little part of that is like not recognizing how people work in business. So it's really easy to pick on this because every single person at Raygun has a paid ChatGPT account. When I see questions getting posted in our Slack where that question could have just gone to ChatGPT, it's a reminder, hey, we're shifting our muscle memory to over here, to be more effective. This is a country that is screaming out for more productivity, and we have our, taxpayer mostly funded university saying, whoa, don't be productive. Don't use modern tools. That's weird to me. I do think, however, that all the university sector is under a lot of stress right now. There's a lot of challenges there. They're losing a lot of talent. They struggled with the international students not being able to travel. Like, they're in a lot of trouble. I'd make the argument I don't think New Zealand needs as many universities as it does have. And I think what we're going to see is certain categories of education shifting away from universities. I said earlier I got a degree, and part of that was me thinking I needed one. And to be fair, I appreciate having it, but I realize I probably didn't need it. And I say to folks, I would hire a self-taught programmer any day of the week if they displayed that passion, and self-drive. In fact, self-taught and self-driven, it's very difficult to have them mutually exclusive. I would not go and get heart surgery from a self-taught heart surgeon. So I think the universities need to scale down what they actually focus on into very deep areas where you absolutely need training, and they should stop trying to go ultra broad and then trying to avoid the future coming.
But then, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, but we also have other types of education here, and I know you employ people out of boot camps, you employ people out of polytechnics, as well as you employ people who are self-taught. And Susan on here has asked a very good question of what does the education system need to do differently to meet the need for employers, and that's a big question to unpack. But have you got any thoughts on when you do employ people from those different pathways and contrasting with universities? Are they, someone who's done a 20-week boot camp and have learned the core skills that they need and maybe done some other micro-credentials and certifications, is that a good enough kind of package for you as an employer versus someone who has spent 3 or 4 years in a tertiary institute learning concepts?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it partly depends on how the organization is set up to receive those people. So an analogy to that was, when we brought into New Zealand through COVID, and that was because Raygun is not a large enough company that we could remote onboard somebody successfully purely remotely. We just know that, but I know there are companies that do enough remote that they could, so we don't do it. I wouldn't, probably recommend finding a technical co-founder who's only done a boot camp, because they will have quite a naive level of understanding. They can build some stuff, which is really cool, and usually that's the spark part where you're like, wow, I could actually make this. And they're actually, I see a lot of energy there. I could be getting this wrong. It's just a little bit of an observation from me, but I feel like a few people that go through those smaller courses and things, they may be people who weren't going to go to university from school anyway. Maybe it's not for them. Maybe it's not their style of learning, whatever it is. But I have never identified a pattern that suggested one group was better or worse than the other at the base level. There's just a level of understanding. A lot of what I find comes from the university degrees, and some of this comes from my own experiences. Oftentimes it'll teach you a level down that so you understand what's going on. And the question becomes, do you really need to know that or not? Now, again, for me, I actually love knowing, how a multi-stage pipeline on a CPU works, and that because that's just me. No, I've never needed to actually know that for what I'm doing, but I like to know it. So a lot of that sort of information isn't being captured in those shorter ones, but it's also somewhat unnecessary. So we do bring in folks from those programs. They often bring in just a different range of skills. One of the things I think we struggle with a little bit is tech in general. I want to say the hierarchies and the experiences and things like that, especially within effective teams, it's very rare that you kind of honor the actual hierarchy. Like if the best idea comes from a junior engineer, no one cares that it didn't come from the principal engineer. And that's something that's quite unique, I think, in tech, that makes this a little bit more complicated as well. The different experiences that, in effect, diversity of thought, helps look at problems in different ways. So no, not a big delta. If you came to us and you'd done a boot camp or you'd gone and got a 4-year software engineering degree, you're going to get the same salary. And maybe, again, a thing I shouldn't say, but it's like nobody cares about the degree. It's like once you're in the team, all we're focused on is running with the ball.
But people do need that base core skill or capability from somewhere, and you're right, they need to get on that starting line. So we started to talk a little bit, or you started to talk a little bit about AI. I just wanted to comment that from the Q&A, you're getting lots of congratulations for your diversity stats in your organisation. So well done. And hopefully your engineering stats will also reflect the same soon.
Well, begs the question, does AI have a gender?
Okay, we won't go there. But let's talk about the likely impact of this kind of technology that's been emerging this year on the workforce in the near term. So talking about the near term, are we going to need developers when we've got products that can write code? Are we going to need designers when we've got these amazing tools that can produce images and videos and things? So what do you think the near-term impact is going to be on the workforce?
It's a good question, and it's a big change. I think this trend will be bigger than the internet, candidly. We had our company all hands in March, and I brought everyone in, and I was debating whether I should delay this because, as we've sort of touched on, I explore some of this tech at home. And so I have a little bit of a grasp on it. But at the same time, it's moving so fast that I don't think that anybody could quite honestly say they're an expert and they have a clear vision of what's going to happen. What we're seeing at Raygun is I'm pushing this stuff very hard because I don't want to build a company so large that I don't know everybody in it. What I want to have is effectively a team of super soldiers, kind of going back to that Iron Man analogy, like how do I get them all to suit up and be able to effectively operate like they're 10 people? Like that's actually really amazing. The thing is, we've got these things like ChatGPT and the LLMs, and people are pretty heavily indexed on them at the moment as what AI is. If you start sort of going a level deeper, you realize there's actually a range of other algorithms around this, like around the chain of thought, chain of reasoning things. You're seeing products like LangChain for doing agents that then effectively are orchestrating the use of multiple AI tools. And I think until that whole space, like the LangChain stuff, it probably won't be LangChain that wins it ultimately. Until that gets really, really slick, I don't think the, we're all losing our jobs scenario, plays out in any hurry. Having said that, I still can't believe it's May, so it'll be here before we know it. So there is that side. When I then talked to the team and I walked through the stats, and people love to say, hey, yeah, but that was because it was an enablement. But Jeff Bezos quit Amazon. Quit his job on Wall Street in 1993 or 1994 because the internet was growing at 2,400%, and he said, look, that's unnaturally high. Something's going on. Bill Gates posted his internet tidal wave memo to Microsoft in late 1995, I believe it was. The internet didn't get 100 million users until 97, 98, right? ChatGPT had 100 million users in like 27 minutes. It's crazy seeing these massive companies that all blew up off the internet, and yet this stuff is accelerating even faster. So there's a lot coming. So I spoke to the team and I said, look, nobody knows where this is going. So firstly, none of us are experts. Don't feel bad that you don't know anything. Secondly, we could sit here all nervous and worrying about it, or we can run at it. If you're kind of saying the obvious future here is that we're going to have these tools, then you should move quickly and be an early adopter. And then lastly, I said, look, I don't believe that anybody's going to figure out AI by doing, we do 10% of time as L&D. Not everybody gets it, but in terms of they might work on their project work, but 4 hours a week. I was like, no one's going to figure out AI in 4 hours a week or skim reading some papers. So we ended up holding an AI week at Raygun that was last week. We went with cross-functional teams. We put the entire company into this. We gave 7 different projects, although we did say, look, if you want to do a different project, feel free. This is just to help you get there. The first half of the Monday, we got every person in the company to do our onboarding coding challenge. So if you were a designer, customer success employee, marketer, you all did the coding test because, holy cow, I can actually do this just by asking the computer what to do. So that actually triggered the aha moment for almost the whole company. So until that point, we had some people who were into it, some weren't. This was like, aha. Then in the afternoon, they kicked into the projects. By Friday, we had these projects demonstrated. One of them is a new way to onboard Raygun. You hooked up to your code repository. It will find and create it'll create a pull request for you that adds all the instrumentation and just sets up the product for you, so you don't even have to write the code. Another one now, when you have errors, it'll actually explain to you what it thinks the problem is, what suggestions it has on how to go and fix that to speed up that time. We're building an internal product, unsurprisingly, called Jarvis, and that is indexing our internal customer data. And so there's a question there earlier from Nathan Bromberg saying, when are you getting the 4090? And that's at work. So we're building a server at work that's going to self-host models, because I don't believe at the moment that it's smart to give all your data to OpenAI. So we want to self-host that stuff. Literally, we had people just putting these tools together, voice to text. So you could say, hey, Jarvis, did we have any outages in February? And the computer talks back to you and says, yes, there was one outage. It was related to a certificate error in this particular subsystem. The outage was 2 hours, Okay, cool. And so we're now looking to expand that system to say, look, let's ingest our Zendesk tickets, our internal wiki, our code. We're going to it's all in Slack as well, so you can message it if you want to not have the voice mode. But this was a team of people who hadn't done any of this stuff on Monday morning. And they're leveraging that stuff to improve. There was a bunch of other projects. And I just said to the team, look, I don't care if we delete all the code on Friday. I just want to make sure that come the following Monday, we can have higher caliber conversations about the way that AI could be exploited to our benefit, whether internally through productivity improvements or customer-facing stuff there. So that's a little bit about what we're doing to try and be proactive in it. Looking at the bigger picture, I think there's some pretty big mega trends that are going to really mess stuff up. So what feels obvious to me is that content creation is going to go to zero. It's going to cost nothing to create content, whether it's a picture, an article, whatever it is. That's zero. I think the folks that are protesting as part of the Writers Guild in America don't realize they're already unemployed. It's not going to come back. They're not going to ban AI. Maybe there's some senior Massey management there. But anyway, the thing is, right now, I believe we're in a moment of asymmetry where a lot of people don't know that content's going to zero. So journalism's going to suffer. We're already seeing spam problems are cropping up on GitHub. Spam is going to go absolutely crazy. And that kind of goes to that same thing. A lot of people are worried about, the singularity type play or the Skynet, the singular AI that ruins everything. And I think that's wrong as well. I think what we're going to actually see is fleets and fleets and fleets of different AIs, and they're all going to be battling it out, to try and prevent spam, create spam.
And you don't think one is going to overcome all of them in the end? And James Cameron was predicting our future. You don't think we're going there?
Not in a hurry. I mean, I don't. At the risk of turning this into a monoliths versus microservices conversation.
We've only got 1 minute left, so you can't spend too long on it.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And as folks have said, the reality is we're actually really good that we've sort of exploited this transformer technology now, because if this was 10 years, like the state of the art, it's costing tens of millions of dollars to build these models, right? Even on the highest end hardware we've got, this is as good as we can do right now at scale. We're very lucky that we don't have a data center's worth of compute power sitting under every young kid's desk at home that's thinking, hey, I write a little bot and do something, right? So we actually have a hardware limitation right now that's going to probably prevent that scenario from arising in the near term.
And a dollars limitation for most people from an accessibility to cloud compute as well.
Yeah. One thing I would say, though, is that the really high part of that is usually training a model from nothing. So that is the tens of millions of dollars thing. I don't actually think that LLM creators are going to be the ones that actually capture the value in the market. I think they're important, but they're not the be-all and end-all of the economic activity.
Well, there's quite a few topics we didn't cover. Nathan also asked about ethics. Andrew wanted me to ask you about some qualifications that we have in the ITP space. So maybe I'll follow those up with you, and I'll put it in one of my partners or write a blog with the answers to those questions later. This has been fascinating, and we could go on for hours and hours, but I did say this would be 45 minutes because it's meant to be brief. I just do want to ask you one last thing. One of the questions on there was if people do want to work for Raygun, do you have a job listing site or anything? Where should they go if they want to learn more about Raygun, or if they do want to send you a pitch or apply for any jobs in the future?
Yeah, great question. We do have a careers page on the website. If you go to raygun.com/careers. At the moment, for full clarity, we're looking at hiring in sales engineering capability in the United States. So we're not right now hiring in Wellington. Having said that, though, if you've listened to this and kind of gone, I'm a super passionate person and I own a computer and I love this stuff, I love to have coffees. You never know when the timing is right. So, I love just meeting high caliber people all the time. And you are one of those people, Vic. So thank you so much for having me on today.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks from people who have been listening to this and who will listen to this in the future. Really appreciate your time. I'll say ka kite and farewell to everyone. Bye.